Okay, welcome back. We're exploring zones 2 and 3 now. Zone 2 is right outside your door. You'll be visiting zone 2 often, frequently, perhaps daily, in the growing season especially. And then zone 3 a little less frequently, maybe just a couple times a week, but you still have to manage some intensity there. Remember, permaculture is all about design, and these zones help us structure those patterns to the details in our design. So some of the principles I noted when I was exploring my zones 2 and 3: always observe and respond, value the marginal, obtain a yield, produce no waste, catch and store energy. I saw a lot of use of renewable energy we'll discuss. We always integrate and not separate. We're going to use the edges and small, slow solutions. So this is my herb garden right off my front porch here. And perennial herbs are wonderful because they come back every year. My father-in-law always asks me, when are you going to clean that up? But we intentionally leave debris because bare soil is the worst sin of all when we're looking for an ecologic solution to growing things. So in here I have herbs which are wonderful for flavor, for cooking. Fresh herbs are medicinal, full of vitamins, phytonutrients. One of the problems we have in our sterile food system is we rely so heavily on salt, sugar, and the flavor of meat to flavor our food that we neglect these wonderful herbs, which are highly potent medicinally as well as nutritionally. When you're eating healthy, food is your medicine. So what do I have here? Yarrow, savory, thyme, sage, all very potent herbs, a variety of flavors, savory flavors predominantly. The nasturtiums will come in this later in the summer. They're annuals, but they set seed so readily. You can see a little water catchment coming off the roof there. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you're also going to notice those wild herbs, like the onion grass, at the edge. So here's another edge spot on the other side of my house, the south-facing side. And speaking of wild herbs, amidst last season's debris, we have a variety of things that are edible. These things we call weeds, they were brought here by Europeans because they knew they could eat them. They knew they were flavorful and nutritious and medicinal. So, do you know you can eat violets, one of the few flowers you might enjoy? Now, generally, once a wild herb flowers, it doesn't taste so good, and the violets were actually eating the flower. This is henbit. It's in the mint family. You can always tell mint by its square stem. I can feel there's 4 sides of this. Mints, again, medicinal, full of vitamin C, but the henbit is flowering now, so it's not so yummy. But harvest that as a tea, dry it, or have it fresh. Cress is another very nutritious and yummy green herb. Sprinkle it in your salad. Got my potatoes from last year coming back. Potatoes stay in the ground. If they don't get frozen, they're back again. Can't say enough about dandelions. All parts of the dandelion are edible. The leaves, the flowers, the roots. Again, another thing Europeans brought because they were feasting on them. They're in production 10 months out of the year, so always can get some greens or some root vegetable starch from them. So you don't like your invasive, noxious weeds? Eat them. And let's not forget the wild onion. Onions are everywhere in the world. Their people are, because they brought them everywhere. Because they're so good, they're so healthful, they're so nutritious and delicious. Sometimes I chop the chive stems for cooking. Sometimes I dry the bulbs and grind them up as onion powder. Very useful. Use the marginal. So here's a space I'm particularly proud of, although you probably think it looks awful. But this is my microclimate. This is my greenhouse, my mini greenhouse that took little to nothing to build. And I did this because this side of our house is south facing. I'm going to turn, and there's the southern sky, the southern edge of our property. There's woods there. We'll be going there for Zone 5. But up above us is that full arc of the sun, going from east to west throughout the day. So in the winter especially, this is getting direct sunlight in the winter. That low angle, because it's facing the southern sky. It stays above 40 degrees in there all year round. It's just wrapped up. There's some tires I scavenged that are closest to us, packed with dirt and rock, creating a thermal mass to hold that temperature, create that microclimate. Of course, the sunlight comes in, and I grow greens in there all winter. This time of year, the stock of food is the leanest, because you've eaten all your winter stores. So you can't wait for the growing season to get fresh food and start restocking your supply. But what's happened here is the eave of our house, this bay window, beautiful south-facing bay window, what we'll talk about inside again. The foundation of the house did not come under this bay window. So again, the heat of the house, the foundation of the house, is a thermal mass and a protection to maintain that microclimate. Of course, you want to make use of vertical space. My husband's a great garbage picker, and he collected this structure. We had no idea why we wanted to have it, but now we do. Our vining plants go on it. Tomatoes. Again, we're facing south here. This is the southern side of the house, where just more examples of vertical space here, a structure for beans to climb. Plus I knit some fishing line against it to keep those deer. That's my problem here. Got plenty of sun, plenty of water, plenty of space, plenty of wildlife foraging. And another use of vertical space, just some fencing. There you go, some gourds can come up on this little fence line. So this is the annual garden. Right now it's under weed suppression because I've cleared back the mulch that I provided over the winter to keep the soil covered, protected, and fertile with the decomposing mulch. But we have this invasive plant that we're going to be talking about, the marsh marigold. Thanks to climate change, the intense rainfall and warming temperatures really get an invasion of this marsh marigold, and you can't dig it up, you can't dig it out, and it's not edible that I know of. I'm not that big of an experimenter to find out, but the more you dig at it, the more you spread it. So just trying to suppress it with some cardboard, again, make no waste. But one day my solar panels are going to go here. I'm going to ground mount those solar panels because, again, that whole south facing placement, absorbing that winter sun. And when I get the solar panels, the chickens can roost under it. But for now, annual crops. The secret to annual crops, we know companion planting, densely plant, combine, and a cover crop. You can see the beginnings of a cover crop. I can't say enough about buckwheat. It works wonderfully. You just plant it everywhere. It outcompetes the weeds. And then as you harvest it in your salads and eat it, has a fun peppery taste. Add it to your salads or cook it up. I love to add fresh veggies to my eggs, right? Then you start to plant the later season things in between. And then the buckwheat goes to seed, and it'll, you can keep that crop from one round of seeds for many years, depending on how long you let it set seed. So you see a whole lot of weed suppression there on the hillside. I'll be getting the buckwheat and a later season cover crop in there, but that marsh marigold was really taking over. So all I can do is cover it and pray for the end. So something that's important for all design, but zones 2 and 3 definitely need water. And this is a rain barrel, 250 gallons of rain barrel that will soon enough be attached to this downspout for the tens of thousands of gallons of water that pour off my roof every year. But, hook that up with drip line and let the gravity feed the water into spaces in the garden laterally, and then going down in elevation, obviously. It's a couple more water catchment systems. You saw the one off the porch for the herb garden before, and then here's another downspout on the side catching this water to feed, again, the gardens and the plantings below gravitationally lower in elevation. So we're into zone 3 now, kind of beyond that intensively managed space. And this is an Asian pear. Asian pears pollinate later in the season, come to fruition later. So we want to stagger our food production over this growing season, obviously. You notice the companion planting, right? We're using the edge to put in garlic. Love using that space around the tree guilds to grow garlic, which is something we use a lot of. Also in here is comfrey. I can't wait to get my comfrey this season. It's a very healing herb, also known as knit bone, to heal my torn fascia in my foot. Here's the berry patch. Love those raspberries. Have 4 varieties of raspberries, so got 4 months of raspberry production. And nature provides either your handful serving every day up to about a quart a week in the height of the growing season. You can see it's starting to leaf out. Took a few years for me to beat the birds to the berries, but now there's enough for everyone to share. This shrubby gnarl is elderberry, and boy, am I glad I have elderberry in these times of pandemic. Elderberries are extremely antiviral. especially good support for the upper respiratory system. I was glad to have them in my freezer and in a syrup form that keeps me healthy. So again, I have a variety of fruit and nut trees, staggering the seasons. This is plum. It's actually poorly placed. I was excited by it because it's down at the bottom of the hill. I know it's getting plenty of moisture. I just pruned it. That debris of the pruning I use to hold the cardboard in place until I can get mulch on it. You know, it's always changing here. It doesn't always look like this. But yeah, it's kind of gets too much sun because this is the southeast corner here, so it gets lots of sun, and it flowers very early in the year, and that's a problem if we have a late frost. So between the squirrels and the late frost, I may or may not get plums, even though, as you can see, there's thousands of blossoms. And I cut half of them off. Pruning is an issue with fruit trees many times. So I'm getting farther out in my zone 3. These are hazelnut bushes. Nut trees are definitely a small, slow solution. Well, not so small, but slow. There's the pecan tree one day, pecans. I hope I live to see them. That'll fill that entire space that we're looking at. Chestnut, some spice bush, got fig trees, nectarine, peach. Again, got to compete with the wildlife. I really have to get some cages up to protect these. That's the nectarine tree. And then the companion planting again. Annual vegetables are around this. Horseradish, which is great for when you're putting your fermented food up. Again, garlic, asparagus, got wild asparagus. April is asparagus month. Again, the use of vertical space. This is a hardy kiwi vine, and my intention is to get it up into the tree, because that's what they do in nature. They use trees for support. I'm trying to protect it now. The deer love these hardy kiwi leaves, which is crazy because kiwi's like from Australia. But I can't wait for the day when I get kiwi that I didn't have to send away 10,000 miles for. So once again, those animal vectors. Look how those deer just grazed this poor fig tree. I definitely got to get some fencing around this. Probably our biggest problem here because of the woods. My husband and our son are like, oh, look at the deer, look at the deer. I'm like, yeah, why don't you get them in our freezer? I'm sorry, but that's what I look at deer. I've seen as many as 13 at a time migrating through. Lastly, I want to mention compost. We probably, from a design point of view, have our compost misplaced. It's pretty far from our house. We weren't designing so intentionally when we put it in place, and it's the pattern that we've become accustomed to. And I do a lot of composting in place. During that gardening, if there's any weeding that's done, I just chop and drop. And of course, I got my worms to feed with the vermicompost as well. Want to mention this tree right here. It's pawpaw. Pawpaw propagate themselves so easily. There's another pawpaw tree here. It's my neighbor's property we're looking into. But working on moving the pawpaws into the forest, as we'll see in our next video, managing in zones 4 and 5.